Hey everybody, it's Mr. Marvin, and in this video I'm going to give you some specific feedback on your close reading final drafts. So in the same way that I made a video for your close reading rough drafts to give you some feedbacks and some things to implement as you prepared for final submission, when I grade your final drafts, I also keep a running list of issues that I see across the board, and then make a video like this to sort of batch those issues and give you some things to keep in mind going forward on future papers. So with that in mind, you'll want to have a blank sheet of paper handy so you can write down the things that you want to remember for next time. As always, not all of these things will apply to every single one of you, but these are just some of the more common or important issues that I thought were worth addressing. So as of this video going up, you will have your final draft of your close reading essays returned to you. What I do when I grade those essays is I grade them using track changes in Microsoft Word. So I appreciate everybody submitting your essays in Microsoft Word format. It doesn't mean you have to write your paper in Microsoft Word, of course. It just means you have to save or export your file from your writing app of choice into a .docx format for me, as we discussed on the first day of class. And then what I started doing this summer, actually, with my classes is I save, when I'm done grading, I save that as a PDF. So that way you have all of my commentary along the right-hand side, and you can see all of my comments as well as my inline corrections without having to hover over every comment or worry about what app you're opening it in, etc. So you will want to make sure that you open up that graded PDF and take a look at my comments. And as I probably alluded to in previous videos, at this point, it is really important to make sure that you take ownership of my feedback. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But it's very easy, I know, because if I were in your position, I would feel the same way. I know it's very easy to sort of just not look at the graded paper, right, from your instructor and just look at the score and be like, okay, and just worry about the number. But if you do that, you're not going to, it's going to be significantly more difficult to get better on future papers because you're not implementing and reviewing and making sure you understand all of the specific feedback that I leave. So I try not to be, I try to be helpful in the comments that I leave on your papers. So please try not to fear opening up your graded files. Just pull the Band-Aid off and take a look, and let me know if you have any questions about anything that I left on there. All right, let's see. So my list isn't super long, so hopefully this video won't be that strenuous, but oh, what I meant to say is you can also print out that graded PDF file so that you have your essay in front of you. And sometimes that's very useful to watch this video and have your own essay in front of you so that you can consider my feedback in the context of your own paper. So do whatever you need to do, but otherwise we will go through it. Since this is the first major paper, I want to re-emphasize something that we hopefully got across in our first day of class, as well as in some of the early videos at the beginning of the course, and that is the importance of following directions. So I know that for you and for me, we are under a serious time constraint trying to get all this stuff done, not only trying to get things done, but also trying to learn things and all this stuff. And so it's very easy, I think, understandably so perhaps, to let some of these small details just kind of slide, right? Because you have bigger, more important things to worry about, arguably. And I want to dissuade you from thinking that way and from falling into that trap. So I really want to encourage you to follow directions to the letter on the course outline, but also specifically the submission instructions in Blackboard. So in all the, I don't have the website open right now, but on all of these submission links, you will see in red, please read and follow these instructions closely. And those include things like making sure you name your file properly, making sure it's in the correct file format, making sure that you don't just copy and paste your paper into the text field, making sure that it's an attachment, and these sorts of things. Those instructions are right underneath the submission link, and again, it is in red that you should read and follow those instructions closely. So when those instructions are not followed, like naming your file, for example, or not putting it in a Microsoft Word document or something like that, is that a big deal in the grand scheme of things for me to have to rename your file? Not really. Is that a big deal for me to have to go in and message you and ask you to resubmit your file in the correct format? No, not really. It takes a few seconds of my life, a few minutes of our lives. But it's not really about how big of a deal it is. So when I emphasize following instructions, it's more in terms of something that I believe is very important, not just in the context of this class, but in the context of your careers and your reputations, because we are judged on the quality of the content and the work that we produce. And so it's not that changing your file name to the correct format, last name, first name, close reading file draft, or whatever, takes a lot of my time. But what it does is it reflects on you that you either ignored that big red banner that said, please read and follow these instructions, or you, probably even worse, is you read those instructions and decided that those instructions didn't apply to you for some reason. So that's just not a good look. And you always want to have a reputation as somebody who follows directions closely, who pays attention to the tiny details, because your life's work is really just a collection of tiny details. And you can apply that to writing. Think like, who cares, Mr. Marvin? It's just one comma. Yeah, but one comma over time, when there are many commas, those things add up. So all of these tiny little details add up to your reputation. And that is how you are judged and how you are perceived by your supervisors and your instructors and your peers, and so on. So please be sure to follow directions. I try to make everything as clear as possible for what I want you to do and how I want you to do it. And when those instructions are not followed, it puzzles me, shall we say. At this point, I would also like to emphasize the importance of following MLA format. So most of you did a fine job with this. You hit most of the MLA formatting elements in terms of the font or the double spacing or the stuff that goes in the upper left-hand corner or your page numbers or your works cited page, all that good stuff. But nevertheless, there were a few papers that missed major components of the MLA formatting or didn't seem to really do the MLA formatting at all. And like I just said, right, it's very easy to say, who cares what my font is, Mr. Marvin? Well, first of all, I care. And second of all, this is a simple matter of following directions. The great thing about MLA format, which I talk about in the How I Grade Your Essays video, is that formatting is either right or wrong. So it's really easy to get the points for MLA formatting. All you have to do is just put your font in the correct font, or put your spacing correctly, or put your name, my name, English 101-H6L : close reading final draft, and then the due date. That's all you have to do, and you'll get those points. So it's a silly thing to lose points for. So make sure that you are following MLA format. Make sure you rewatch the MLA formatting video. If you are struggling with the technological issues, once again, remember that you can download Microsoft Word for free using your student credentials. That link is in the course resources folder. You can also use the school computers if you would prefer to do that. Yeah, I think I've made it as easy as possible for you guys to follow those instructions and get those points. If you're still struggling, I'd be happy to help you answer any questions or help you figure anything out. But yeah, otherwise, I think it's your responsibility to do that stuff. Okay, at the top of the video here, sort of, I also want to reiterate what we talked about on the first day of class and what I talked about in the rough draft feedback video, as well as what I talk about in the Is This the Right Course for You video. And here's where it gets real, because now you have done a major essay for me, and that is worth a significant number of points, 15 points, out of your total of 100, and so now things have gotten real. And so what I want to emphasize is that this class, our 6-week hybrid summer version of college composition, is probably the most challenging version of this course that you can take. And that's not your fault or my fault. It's just because of the rigor of college composition in the first place. It's a college-level writing course, probably unlike any writing course or English course you've taken before. It is 6 weeks, which is Usually a semester is 15 weeks long, and this is 6 weeks, so that's more than twice as fast. And it's also a hybrid course, which means there are significant technology components which can add friction and difficulty, and there's more room for error, technical difficulties, these sorts of things. That format also requires that you be very self-disciplined and independent in getting your work done, that you take initiative to get in touch with me when you have questions, and all of that sort of stuff. So, why am I reiterating all of this stuff that we've already talked about before? Well, I'm reiterating it because if you have taken English 096, this class is probably going to be very challenging to pass. Even if you passed English 096 with an A plus, we don't have A pluses, but even if you passed 096 with an A, the jump between a 15-week, 6-credit developmental English class and a 6-week, 3-credit hybrid college-level English course is vast. It is a vast increase in difficulty. And that is why we encourage students who pass 096 to take English 101S. And I won't reiterate everything about that class because I talk about it in the Is This the Right Course for You video. But the long story short is that class is much similar to English 096 in its format and pacing. It's 6 credits, it's got embedded tutors, it's got computer labs, it's got all this stuff to help students have the best chance of fulfilling their English 101 credit. Now, this is not a commentary on any single one of you individually. It's not a comment on whether I think you should stay in the class or withdraw from the class or whatever. I'm just trying to impress upon you the importance of understanding that this class, in terms of the standards that each of us need to meet to be able to pass the class and move on, is a significant jump up from English 096. English 101 is a gateway course to many other classes that you probably want to and need to take. So this is not a class that you can just kind of rush through and just squeak by with a C, because you will be doing yourself a huge disservice. Because then you'll go into English 102 or English 202, and it will be even more challenging than this class, and you'll feel even more overwhelmed, and then you'll have to repeat classes, and that's just not for the best. So I'm not saying this to yell at anybody. I'm just saying this because I want each of you to have the best chance of succeeding in this class. And if you just barely squeaked by developmental English, taking a 6-credit summer hybrid version of college composition, I think it's going to be more difficult than it needs to be, shall we say. Your classes should be challenging, but not impossible and not frustrating. So I don't want to harp on this for too much longer, and I'm happy that each of you signed up for my class, and I'm happy to work with you, but I want each of you to do what is best for you and your success. Passing English 101S is enough to satisfies your English 101 requirement, so there's no reason why you have to do a 6-credit hybrid, a 6-week hybrid version, right? You're really just making things more difficult for yourself. So enough said about that. If you have any questions, you can obviously feel free to speak to me in private, and I'd be happy to talk with you more. Yeah, and most of you, I think, are doing a fine job, and I think we'll be all right. I don't know if that's a guarantee that you'll pass the class, but I think that you're certainly capable. All right, so I think that covers all of the big stuff. So let's get into some specifics about this paper. So the first thing, and again, I just write these things down as I encounter them. The first thing that I want to talk about is please follow my rough draft suggestions. In the same way that not, following simple instructions like naming your file correctly or submitting it in the right file format or following simple instructions like that. In the same way that that's not a good look for you as a student, it's also not a good look if the same mistakes that I pointed out on your rough draft are still on your final draft. So the point of the rough draft is for you to start your paper and show it to me and your classmates in a very low stakes environment, right? As long as you do the rough draft, you get the point for it. So the value of the rough draft is not the point, obviously. The value of the rough draft is the comments that I leave, because I am also the one that's going to grade your final draft, which is worth significantly more in terms of point value. So when I spend my time commenting on and reading your rough draft and leaving you comments and suggestions about mistakes to fix or things to address to make your paper better, I expect those suggestions to be followed. And when those same mistakes, especially when they're really simple mistakes, like when I point out spelling errors, when those simple mistakes that take 2 seconds to fix are not fixed on your final draft, it makes me wonder why I'm spending my time giving you that feedback. And it also makes me wonder about your thought process in terms of your investment and how much you care about doing well in the class. So all that is to say, please do follow my rough draft suggestions. If you're not going to follow them, you can let me know, and I just won't spend time commenting on your essay. That would be equitable, I suppose. But I hope you will take my suggestions to heart and make sure that you are implementing those changes, implementing that feedback. If you don't know what my feedback means or what I'm talking about when I comment on something on your rough draft, please do get in touch with me. I'd be happy to clarify it further. That shows that you're taking initiative to get better at your coursework. And if you don't want to talk to me for some reason, you can always bring your rough draft to the Writing Center and ask them for their opinion about that. Now, obviously, you should always err on the side of what your instructor wants over a third party, but the option is there for you. All right, let's see. Next, this is one. Yes, watch out for unnecessary prepositional phrases. So this is a wordiness issue that comes down to that happens at the sentence level. A prepositional phrase shows ownership or position or relationship, right? So under the table, over the bridge, by the author, right? These different things are prepositional phrases. You want to watch out for these things because very often they're unnecessary and they can really clog up your sentences, right? So let's say, I should have written down an example. If you say something like the article by the author, right? So by the author is a prepositional phrase, right? It adds a little bit of information, but it shows the relationship of the article to the author. This is a wordy kind of construction, right? So you can instead say the author's article, right? That sort of thing. If you say the article in the newspaper is a prepositional phrase, does it add anything? Could you just say the article blank? I think a lot of times you can. So if this applied to your paper, I would have labeled these things, watch out for unnecessary prepositional phrases, and you should read that sentence with that phrase removed, and you'll be able to hopefully see how the sentence gets a lot tighter without really losing anything of essential importance. A naked quote. Make sure you see, they say, I say, chapter 3. So, naked quotes are a major problem in academic writing, not in our class specifically, but in all of academic writing. Remember that these are quotes that don't have a setup, right? So, such as, according to Smith, quote, or Smith states, or whatever. Here's the quote, and let's say that's on page 14, and then some sort of commentary. Smith explains how, and you explain how that quote ties back to your thesis statement. So 2 major components here. First is the introduction or the setup of the quote, which is very easy. And then the more challenging part is explaining what the quote means, how it relates to your thesis statement, and what we should think about the quote according to you. Okay, so you need both of these components, and when you don't have them, you have naked quotes, quotes that are unaccompanied by setup or commentary. It is not your reader's job to figure out why you are making them read these quotes. It is your job to explain their significance. And remember that quotes are not just a simple matter of dropping them in here and there just to say that you have some quotes. It is really the cornerstone of academic writing, because it's all about analyzing and thinking critically about other people's ideas and responding to those ideas in writing. So once again, They Say, I Say, Chapter 3, one of the most important chapters in the book. Please make sure that you study it closely, and as soon as you start implementing the lessons of Chapter 3, your writing, in an academic sense, will improve immeasurably. Watch out for ambiguous pronouns. Do I have a shortcut for that? Nope. So when I say something like, what is it? Or what is this, right? This is a super common thing, right? This is important because it shows how the author uses humor. This is a pronoun, takes the place of a noun. When you use this without any qualification in terms of what it refers to, the reader is going to say, this what? What are you talking about? What do you mean? Right? So this passage or this example. So just watch out for these ambiguous thises. And same thing for it. It shows. What is it? What are you talking about? All right? So you can just say, this example shows how the author uses humor. All right, titles. Let's talk about titles. So your titles should not be essay number 1. Your title should not be close reading. Your title should not be whatever the title of the article was. Your title should be the title of your paper. And a title for a paper should be creative, it should be unique, it should be original, it should be punchy, it should be something that kind of summarizes what your paper is about and gives the reader a little bit of a preview of what you're going to talk about in that paper. So calling your paper the same title as your article is also not a good look. Talked about fragments in the rough draft feedback video. Fragments are incomplete sentences. Remember, you need a subject, which is who or what the sentence is about, and you need a predicate, which is what the subject is doing. If you're missing one of these things, you have a fragment. Just use the same example, showing how the author uses humor. This is an incomplete sentence. There's no subject. Okay, so you have to make sure that your sentences have subjects and predicates. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got run-on sentences, sentences that go on for too long. One rule of thumb that I like to tell my students is if you have a sentence that goes on for more than 2 lines typed, you should probably take a look at that sentence and see if you can trim it down. Once in a while, maybe you have a big long sentence like that, but for the most part, sentences that go on for more than 2 lines tend to be sentences that could be consolidated or trimmed down or broken up. Remember that run-on sentences go on for too long because there's no punctuation and your reader starts to run out of air and they lose track of what you're talking about. So be careful of run-on sentences as well. I think we talked about names in the rough draft feedback video. First rule, spell them correctly. Second rule is full name the first time, last name only every time thereafter. So John Smith the first time, and then every time after that you can just call them Smith. Don't refer to them by their first name because, again, these are formal academic papers, and first name basis is inappropriate. Most of you did a fine job of not relying on the first person, which I think is good. I don't want to reiterate everything that I talked about in the thesis statement video, as well as the stuff we talked about in the first day of class. But remember that the first person, I think, I feel, I believe, in my opinion, right? These sorts of phrases. This is a tool, right? It's a tool, and you need to ask yourself, is it the right tool for the job? It's very easy to write this way because hopefully you know what you think, you know what you feel, you know what you believe, you know what your opinions are, if you're lucky. But because these are formal academic argumentative papers, it very often can undermine the argumentative authoritative qualities of your prose. And what I mean by that is when you say, I think the author was effective. You're just giving us a statement of fact about something that you think, right? Nobody can disagree with the fact that you think this. But what's important here is not the fact that you think this, but the concept, the idea itself, that the author was effective. This is what is debatable. This is what can be argued. This is what you should focus on, not the I think and the I feel and the I believes. It still is what you think because it's your paper and it's not in quotation marks. It's just a matter of tone. It strengthens the tone. It makes you sound more authoritative, more confident, more like you know what you're talking about rather than you're just giving us, just your 2 cents about what you think. So always ask yourself, is this first person necessary given what I'm trying to do in this paragraph or this sentence? LPs and SPs, long paragraphs and short paragraphs. So we talked about this when we looked at your rough drafts on last Monday's class. How long does a paragraph need to be? As long as it needs to be, but no longer than that. So is there such a thing as a long paragraph? Totally. Is there such a thing as a short paragraph? Totally. The problem is when a paragraph is too long or too short. A paragraph that is too long tends to go off track and starts talking about something other than its main idea. Remember that a paragraph should have one main idea. When you start a new main idea, you start a new paragraph. Can a paragraph be too short? Definitely. If a paragraph is too short, it feels underdeveloped. It feels like you haven't fully completed exploring that main idea. So there needs to be some sort of happy medium. Remember what we've talked about when it comes to, when it comes to paragraph structure. Oops. Let me get this out of here. Each paragraph should focus on one main idea. That main idea should be clearly related to the paper's thesis. This is how you keep everything on track and laser focused from paragraph to paragraph. A paragraph's topic, that is usually the first sentence, establishes the main idea. Then the body sentences explain, elaborate, cite, analyze evidence to prove the main idea. And then there's a concluding sentence that wraps up the main idea and explain how it relates to your thesis statement. When you hit enter and indent, that tells your reader visually that you're starting a new paragraph, which means you're starting a new main idea. So it tells the reader, hey, make sure you've understood everything that I've talked about because now we're going to talk about something else. If you want to jump ahead in They Say, I Say, I strongly recommend taking a look at Chapter 8, which is about connecting the pieces, and that goes from sentence to sentence and paragraph to paragraph. It's probably my favorite, along with Chapter 3, probably my favorite chapter in the book. So make sure that your paragraphs are complete and always ask yourself, is this paragraph too long? Is it too short? Should I combine it with another paragraph, or should I add stuff in, or should I cut stuff out if needed? Along the same lines, watch out for long sentences. This kind of goes back to the run-on sentences thing. A sentence can be long and punctuated properly and be fine. But you also want to ask yourself, am I putting my reader through an uncomfortable experience having them read a sentence that goes on and on and on and on and on? Notice that I don't have a comment for this is a short sentence because you should always err on the side of shorter sentences. That doesn't mean every sentence should be short and you should sound like a robot or like it's a children's book, etc., etc. It just means that you should value simplicity in your writing. That doesn't mean you have to be simplistic. Simplistic is about dumbing things down. Simplicity is about elegance, making sure that you only have the necessary parts, right? Your car has no unnecessary parts, okay, hopefully. Your sentence should have no unnecessary words. If there are any unnecessary words, get them out of there. And that allows your ideas to come through because they're not smothered, right, or overgrown with extra words or phrases. Probably talked about this in the rough draft feedback video as well. Be careful about starting paragraphs with quotes or with authors. Paragraphs should start with one of your own main ideas. When you start a paragraph with a quote, you're ceding your paragraph to somebody else's main idea, and you're just reacting to the quote rather than leading the argument. So, I think it's not uncommon for a student to start a new paragraph and to have no idea what they're going to say. So they just say, well, I'll just start with this quote and I'll just talk about the quote. And that, that's kind of understandable because it's easier to react to something that's there than it is to create something original out of nothing, right? That's very difficult. But you still want to be careful of starting your paragraphs with quotes. Paragraphs should start with your own main ideas. When you start with a quote, you're not starting with your own main idea. You're starting with somebody else's idea, and you're just reacting. So you want to start with your own main idea, then bring in the quote that will help you prove that main idea or explain or further that main idea. And then talk about the quote. And then you have a paragraph right there. When you start with a quote, you're kind of like starting in the middle of a paragraph, really. Chapter 3 talks about the quote sandwich. It's not an open-faced sandwich. It's a quote sandwich. So the quote should always kind of be gingerly surrounded, right? And comfortably surrounded with your own commentary, your own sentences, your own ideas. Along the same lines, be careful of ending paragraphs with quotes. If you end a paragraph with a quote, then you're not talking about the quote at all. Okay? You're just letting the quote speak for itself, which is lazy, and doesn't do your reader the service that they need, which is for you to explain the significance of the quote and how it relates to your thesis and what they should think about the quote that you have provided them. Quotes and we'll say authors in intros and conclusions. This is particularly relevant to the synthesis essay because one of the big differences that I talked about in the synthesis explanation video is that the first paper, the close reading, was about an article, and the synthesis essay is not a paper about articles. It's a paper that uses articles to support your own point. So in the same way that your paragraphs, in my opinion, should most of the time start with your own voice, your own main ideas, and not with quotes, I think it's probably best to generally err on the side of not quoting authors in your intros and not quoting authors in the conclusion either. And you don't even really need to introduce, in the papers going forward, you don't even really need to bring the authors in. It made sense to do that in the first paper because your paper was about the author. It was about their article. But for the synthesis paper and the papers going forward, it's not about the articles. It's about your ideas on the topic, and you're using the articles to help you. But you don't need to bring the articles in immediately, and you don't need to quote from them immediately most of the time. So when you quote in your intro, you just kind of bloat up your intro, and you've kind of, whenever you have a quote, you have to talk about that quote. So if you bring in a quote, then you have to talk about it, and now you're kind of doing analysis like right in your introductory paragraph, which is not really what an intro is supposed to do. It's supposed to introduce, right, the reader to your topic, to your thesis statement, to your paper. And when you do that, I think we can confuse ourselves because we've kind of already started talking and we're kind of like jumping right into the middle of the paper in the first paragraph and that sort of thing. So a lot of this stuff comes down to don't overthink it, right? Your paper needs a beginning, a middle, and an end. The beginning is all you, right? Your ideas, your introduction, your thesis statement, your argument. The ending is all you, right? Your conclusion, you're wrapping it up, you're restating your thesis, your final thoughts. And in the middle, that's when you do all the work. That's when you analyze the authors. That's when you make your points. That's when you convince the reader of your argument. That's when you interpret the sources that you're working with. Okay? So you need a beginning where you tell the reader what you're going to talk about. You need a middle where you talk about it. And then you need a conclusion where you talk about what you talked about. Just like giving a speech. Speaking of, and this is my last thing, I think, yes, main ideas need to be narrow and focused. So, sidebar. I know that some of this stuff might seem kind of prescriptive, right? Like I'm telling you how you should write. And writing is a very creative endeavor, so that can feel offensive, perhaps. It's not that I'm telling you that this is the one true way to write a paragraph or write a sentence or write an essay. It's that I'm trying to give you good rules of thumb, good principles, good strategies that tend to work most of the time, if not all the time. Once you get these basics down, and once you can do these sorts of things without thinking about it, then you can start to bend the rules or break the rules or do more creative things. Structure your paragraph in a different way. Manipulate your text or your reader in different ways. But you have to walk before you can run, so to speak. So all the things that I talk about in these sorts of videos are, again, sort of basic fundamental rules. It doesn't mean they're the be-all, end-all. It doesn't mean it's the only way to write. But you can trust me that these are good things to know how to do. So I hope that makes sense. So speaking of, main ideas need to be narrow and focused. So you should start, right? A topic sentence should tell the reader what the paragraph's main idea is. And when your topic sentence or your main idea is broad, it becomes difficult to write a focused paragraph. So everything leads naturally. Everything depends on everything. It's like the interconnectedness of the universe. When you don't have a good, clear, focused thesis statement, the whole paper is twisting in the wind. The whole paper is confused and lost and unfocused and disorganized because there's no guiding light. And it's the same thing for your paragraphs. If you don't have a good topic sentence that clearly tells you, as the writer, and your reader what you're going to talk about in that paragraph, then the paragraph just kind of has to figure it out as it goes. And that's not good for your reader's experience. And it's not good for you in terms of getting your ideas across. So, for example, if you say, if the first sentence, so I'm going to indent, right, start a new paragraph. If you start a paragraph that says, the author uses several rhetorical devices. If this is your topic sentence, right, this is not a very focused or main or narrow or precise or specific main idea, right? Because you're saying that the author uses several rhetorical devices. Now, that may be true, but what this tells your reader is that this paragraph is going to be about the several rhetorical devices. And do you think that you can write a focused paragraph that goes in depth on several rhetorical devices? I don't think you can do it. I don't think I could do it. So this is not a good, I don't mean to yell, not a good topic sentence because it's vague, right? On the other hand, if you said one of the rhetorical devices that the author uses throughout is humor. This is a good topic sentence because it is focused and specific, and it tells the reader that in this paragraph, you're just going to talk about one thing, which is how the author uses humor. Okay? And you can bring in a quote of how they use humor. You can bring in 4 quotes about 4 different rhetorical devices in one paragraph. Okay? All right. So, sorry I'm a little bit fired up in this video, but I care a lot about this stuff, and I care about making sure that you guys care about this stuff so that you do well on your assignments and so that you do well in the class and so that you can pass the class and so you can move on with your academic and professional goals. So, if there's anything I said in this video or anything I did not say in this video that you have questions about, please do post in course questions. I'd be happy to clarify. Alrighty, I hope you guys are having a good week. Enjoy the weekend, and I will see you guys Monday.